everybody. It is time for the regional finals in Super Region 3. With Tony Nicolette, I'm Brandon Meisner, and we are pleased to have you with us to take a look at how things are going to shape up in SR3. Tony, before we get started reviewing last week's games, just a general note, we thought is a pretty interesting set of matchups, and I think that we got as good a set of games as we could have in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, both games were decided by a total of 4 points, right? I suppose mathematically they could have gotten a little closer, but games, Grand Valley wins their game in the final minute. Central Missouri goes and has a chance to tie in the final minute, and of course the block PAT happened. So both of those games came down to basically the last 20 to 30 some odd seconds, and in the playoffs that's certainly what you hope for. And on a certain level, I guess you think if teams are that good, you'd almost expect it to a little bit, but the fact that you got it and then got such great environments for both was pretty cool.
Absolutely. Before the game, we're going to start out with the discussion of Harding at Central Missouri first. Before the game, I had mentioned several times that I could think of a number of different ways that this would go, and I just didn't know which road the game would take. And it took the high-scoring road.
Right. Right.
It was a 35-34 win for Harding over Central Missouri. Let's look at some videos, some highlights from the game. But, it was a high-scoring game, and that was reflected in some individual stat lines. Zach Zabrowski was 34 of 44. He had 425 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. Also added 16 rushes for 94 yards. And, Harding was Harding on the ground. De La Cruz had 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. Martin Chauncey had 4 carries for 127 and 2 touchdowns. And, it was a game that at one point, a little late in the game, it looked like Harding might have had it under control, and a game, a style of play and a game script that they would have been happy to have accepted at the start of the game. But Central Missouri, as you said, did make a comeback and scored with basically, 20 seconds left on the clock. And as you'll see coming up, there'll be a blocked PAT. That was the difference. Central scored, and then they went for the game-tying PAT. It was blocked by Gage Price for Harding, and it was not without controversy, as there were several people who claimed that there should have been a foul called on the block. Even officials that I was talking to before our show on Sunday said they thought it was the right call was made. By the time the show was over, I got a text that said, "Yeah, I've been talking with supervisors and such, and we believe a penalty should have been called." That was the only controversy. That was the only bad thing that happened in that game. Otherwise, it was a classic game between two distinct styles, and it was in my opinion, a celebration of SR3 football. Fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the thing about that is that, so first of all, Harding stayed true to who they were throughout that entire game. They played their style of ball, and they really controlled things the way that they wanted to. And yet, as impressed as I was with their play and how strong, despite this, they gave up a lot of yards, but that defense still played a really good game. I was equally impressed with Central Missouri. You talked about how, we both kind of mentioned the comeback. Mm-hmm. They were down 14 with 5-6 minutes to go.
Right. That's a death sentence against Harding.
Heck yeah, it is. And so for them to get that 85, now I can't remember what the number was, but that long stinking touchdown that they got. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, Harding gets a great kick return on the ensuing kick and sets up shop in great field position, and still Central Missouri finds a way to get the stop and then makes that great drive to score the potential tire. It's just, yeah, you're dead on. For them to be down 2 scores with 5-6 minutes to go. Death sentence is the exact way to characterize it against a team like Harding, and yet Central Missouri found a way to almost pull off and complete the comeback. So yeah, what a great game. It really was fun to watch that one.
One thing I forgot to mention that I did mention during our show on Sunday was that Central Missouri at one point in the third quarter had a 1st and goal from the 2, and they did not get in on 4 shots.
Yeah.
And after the game, Paul Simmons thought that was probably the key to the game.
The goal line stand is unbelievable. I mean, what was it, 1st and goal from the 2? And to keep those guys out, just makes such a statement about character and perseverance. And as long as there's a few inches left, we're going to keep on battling. And that's why this has been such a special season, because of the character and the toughness of our young men, and just the never say quit attitude. And awesome. It was an awesome goal line stand, and obviously it ended up, being the difference in the ball game.
And I'm not one to necessarily believe that the game would have played out exactly like it did, and that was the winning score. But at the same time, or the winning the winning plays in that game. But at the same time, it's hard to deny how it could have played out very different if Central scores there and is never down by 2 scores, so on and so forth. So Harding's a team, has a reputation for playing good defense, and that showed in this one.
Yeah, they sure did, and agreed. That's it. You never want to theorize what would have happened otherwise, but yeah, I mean, the complexion of the game could have changed just enough to where maybe the outcome is slightly different. Who knows? But that was a whale of a stand. And even watching the game, I'm thinking to myself, wow, they had 4 cracks from the 2 and they got nothing. So that's some big defense and very impactful indeed. I don't think for the coach to undersell it, I don't think he could. I think it was one of those things, and it was probably an emotional lift that Harding carried through the rest of that game.
Well, another great game in Super Region 3 was Pitt State's visit to Grand Valley. The Gorillas come up short in this one. They fall 24-21. You were at the game. You were on the call on the Grand Valley Sports Network. So tell me what your overall thoughts were about that.
I think it was – I got the impression that and I don't know how or why I got this. I just think Pitt State coming in may have theorized that Grand Valley would come out a little flat. And I don't – because, hey, look, even though it's a step, it was still a game against Ferris. And you can't undersell what that means, to those 2 schools and those 2 teams to play each other and whatnot. And so I think Pitt State really wanted to let their play do as much of the talking as they could. And in a lot of ways, they did a great job of that. I mean, their scheme was really solid. That Grand Valley, didn't give up enormous amounts of yards, but Pitt State was definitely more efficient in terms of their per play output. They had more first downs, and they kind of possessed the ball the way that their style lends itself to. And yet somehow, despite the fact that they had those advantages throughout the game, Grand Valley kept making plays, particularly defensively with the 4 turnovers, and one of them was a tip. But I mean, hey, the defensive lineman, got in the way of it, and they got tipped at the line. So, it's not like those were just chance plays. And Grand Valley took those 4 turnovers, and that was the difference in the game. I think I mentioned this on Inside D2 Football this past Sunday. Pitt came into that game having only allowed 14 points off of turnovers all season, and Grand Valley scored 21 points off of turnovers in that game. And I think, Coach Wooster talked in the post-game presser a little bit about how Grand Valley just knew that they had to stick with what they believed in as far as their philosophies offensively. And I even was asking them a question. It's like, gosh, 2-minute drill, you're down 4, you need a score, and they still ran the ball. Right. So, the idea that they're going to run the ball in the 2-minute drill just shows you what they're committed to and how they know that, that they really believe that they can work things out. And it was just a grinded out win against a tough opponent when, by all accounts, they probably didn't have their best day, and yet they still found a way to win. And again, we talk about playoff football, especially in this region. That's what it's all about.
I always observed that Zabrowski put up big numbers against Harding. That's the reason that's interesting is because it doesn't happen very often. Once you get into the playoffs, especially in tough regions, especially in semifinal games and championship games, 225 passing can be a big day.
Sure.
It is about making winning plays in the playoffs, and that's obviously one of the things that Grand Valley did. A belief that you can win, a belief in what you're doing, and that's huge. And that's why I've made the joke a million times now that stats are for losers, but that's one of the reasons why. You get outstatted and you win the football game. And ultimately, the only stat that matters is that you have one more point than the other team after 60 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean the stats, they can be for losers, but I mean sometimes again that's you have to be able to read all of the stats to really understand the full story. So again, I mean in most categories, Pitt State had the better of it in that game, but in a couple of categories that are critical, turnover margin being one and penalties being another, those are spots where Grand Valley had a little bit of the better of it. And what's I think most telling about that in terms of the context of that game is Pitt State really kind of hangs its hat on being more towards the end of mistake free. And it was those types of mistakes that ultimately probably ended up being the difference in the game. Because again, they had all the other things to their advantage, but those mistakes are what gave Grand Valley the windows that they needed to be able to gain the advantage late and get the win.
Well, after the game this week, I was excited because Grand Valley and Pitt had never played. I just wanted to play this. It's a quote from Scott Wooster because it's something that I hadn't thought of either. I'm going to play that right now.
Pitt State came in here, awesome game plan, and just as good a football game I can remember in a long time. You take the all-time wins leader in Division II, you take the best winning percentage D2, you put them in a playoff game, and that's what you get. Phenomenal football game.
Well, congratulations and thanks to Wooster and Grand Valley for knowing that, promoting that. I mean, I did know that, but I never thought of it in those terms. And props to the folks at Grand Valley for actually knowing that, talking about it, and making it even bigger than I thought it was at the before the game was played. So that's fantastic.
We did talk about it on the broadcast, just for what it's worth. Both Brian Fongers and I knew about that. And I want to give Pitt State a nod too, because that was actually in their game notes. So I mean, both schools knew coming in about it, and we're actually putting that information out there for anybody that was interested. So
it's fantastic. It's this is a preview of Super Region 3. This is not inside D2 football, but that's one of the things we complain about sometimes or critique is promotion. You did it right. Congratulations on for you. So what have these two teams earned? I think that Grand Valley and Harding going to face each other, and they've earned what will probably be a fist fight.
Another grudge match. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, so, for many years, I was joking because, I'd be bored because it was going to be Northwest and Harding again. It's like, seems like they played every year. This year's been fun because these are all new games for the most part, or maybe the second time a program has faced each other. But this is another first time for Grand Valley after, the tedium of, if you call it that, of playing Ferris State in the opening round. I've got to think that everybody at Grand Valley is really excited to play somebody new.
Yeah, and I mean that was actually there was some buzz just within the GLIAC as well, and in that once the first round was over and Grand Valley had earned that next spot, when you looked at the bracket, it's like, okay, they've got a chance to play Pitt State now. Okay, never played them. And then you looked at the other side of the bracket and you knew, well, they're going to get the winner. If Grand Valley were to win, they're going to get the winner of Central Missouri and Harding. And those are two teams that Grand Valley's never played before either. Right. So, I think just within GLIAC circles, we were all a little bit fired up about that because you knew there were going to be a string of games coming up. Yeah. If Grand Valley were involved with them, they're all going to be games against teams that they'd never played before. So that, you knew there was going to be some fun at least a couple weeks in a row if Grand Valley was able to keep winning, and then they've done that so far.
Well, let's talk about this game, Tony. As I said, to me, it looks like it will be a fist fight. In some ways, the teams mirror each other. They both stop the run well. I would say if you're looking at it from the Harding standpoint, though, they would say, yeah, Grand Valley doesn't give up a lot of yards on the ground, but there aren't that many schools or many teams that actually try to run against them. In your opinion, is that criticism legit? And if it is legit, why has that come around? Is it Grand Valley shown such an ability to stop the run, or is Grand Valley get ahead and teams are forced to throw? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are probably kernels of truth to all of that, but it's a little more nuanced than that. So, yes, Grand Valley has proven to be quite good against the run, and I think some of that when you manifest or when you see a team that likes to run the ball, try to run the ball in the first half and can't do it, it's a manifestation of that run defense is pretty darn good. Yes, there is another line of thinking that says that, okay, if that team's behind and they have to throw, they abandon the run, so that's going to help Grand Valley's rush stats. There's another piece of that, too, where, when a team leads the country in sacks, all those plays count against the run total as well. So there are ways that you can spin that to where it's, hey, Grand Valley's good against the run, but how good are they? Well, they're pretty good, but there's absolutely a ton of truth to the idea that they don't play anybody that runs the scheme that Harding does. And it's going to be a completely different, theme and sequence of preparation and understanding of what the is going to be asked of the different roles of the defense in each position and what their assignments are and all that kind of stuff. I mean, so it is absolutely a unique set of preparation. It's not something that they see very often. And so any perceived advantage that Grand Valley might have had, let's say, against playing against a team like a Ferris that they've played, multiple times over the last 3 years, there's none of that there. This is a brand new thing that they're going to have to approach. But similarly, how Grand Valley approaches their offense and how they actually try to stop what Harding does, those are probably going to be things that Harding hasn't seen either.
Yeah, Scott Wooster actually talked about the excitement of playing against that scheme. I'm going to play this for you.
Really excited to go against a Harding team that I don't know if Grand Valley State's played them before in the past, have not. But with this mid-triple option offense. And I started my career in the option offense, traveled down to Georgia Southern to see Paul Johnson, all that. And so it's exciting to play an offense we haven't seen much of lately in the last couple of years.
I thought that was interesting. Very interesting because, he has experience with the offense. Might have some experience with how to stop it too. And that was eye-opening because I didn't know that about Scott Wooster. So that should be interesting because, there are lots of different schemes. It seems that people deploy against Harding to try to stop them, and only one has really stoned them. And Harding always seems to get their yards.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that Grand Valley, if there's any sort of, and I wouldn't call this an advantage, but if there is any sort of, just even sort of MO of a team that suits well to at least make this a competitive game, it's that Grand Valley's used to trying to being in situations where they have to be patient, and so they have to understand that Harding is going to get their yards. They're going to get yards on almost every play. They seldom run plays that go for losses. They're going to get themselves into third and manageable on a regular basis, and
fourth and manageable.
Yeah, exactly. And so I forget. I mean, Harding converts. It's an obscene. I want to say it's like 60 or 70% on third downs. I mean, it's just some sort of astronomical, inconceivable number, and Grand Valley is just going to have to be okay with the fact that, hey, it's going to be really hard to get off the field against these guys. But it doesn't mean that you can't, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to make the next play, and they're just going to have to be enormously patient. And then similarly, to me, the biggest key for them is when they've got the ball, they're going to have to be efficient with it, because that's one of the things that Harding's style of play does, is it facilitates the clock burning like crazy. And you look at the box score just from this past week. I'd be willing to wager Central Missouri isn't used to only having the ball 8 times. That's all they had in that game, and that's probably about how a Harding game typically shakes out. If you're going to get the ball 7, maybe 8 times, you can't plan on having it any more than that. So you're going to have to be super efficient with it. And so Yeah, it's a unique challenge for Grand Valley. And again, similarly, I'd be willing to wager that the Harding coaches are probably pretty fired up for this game too, because I know that their defense has been stout all year. I think that they're well suited to give Grand Valley some problems, and they want to, prove that, hey, people don't know a whole lot about us because we only play in our own conference, but we've already knocked off an MIAA team. We're not too afraid to try and knock off a GLIAC team while we're at it.
All right, let's look at this. Look at keys to the game, Tony.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned a couple, but you picked on Inside D2 Football Grand Valley to win the game.
I did.
Tell me, what are the keys to Grand Valley coming out on top?
So I already mentioned that they're going to have to be efficient on offense, and I think part of that starts with establishing their own run game. They're going to have to be mistake-free, so they can't give Harding extra possessions and the ability to continue to burn more clock. Again, Grand Valley is just over the last couple of years, they haven't won all the tight games that they're in, but they're used to being in a lot of tight games, and I think that could be an advantage for them. I mean, if you look at Harding this year, this is the only tight game that they've had was last week against Central Missouri, and even then, we talked about it earlier in the show. It was 6 minutes earlier, it was death sentence. So it wasn't a close game. So if Grand Valley is able to hang around and be patient, that's one of the advantages they've got, is they just know how to win tight ball games and win hard ball games. And it's not to say that Harding doesn't, but I know we've seen Grand Valley do that repeatedly over the last couple of years, and we've seen them do it a lot just within this one season alone. So I think those are a couple of the keys for them. Is, again, they're going to have to be efficient on offense when they've got the ball. They can't waste possessions. And they're going to have to find a way to get some top stops and see if they can't force a turnover. I mean, getting a possession back away from Harding is going to be something that nobody really seems to do successfully against them, and they're going to have to see if they can make that happen on Saturday.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the turnover, because I picked Harding to win, and I have two keys. And understand, and I think this goes for both of us. When we're picking a team to win, neither one of us is thinking 35-7. We're both thinking it's going to be one score, maybe 3 points,
Totally.
that kind of game. So these are the two keys that I think will be key to Harding coming out on top. The first one was to avoid turnovers. They can probably manage one. I think two would be, impossible to manage, because that takes away the kind of game you want to play. Now you've just extended the length of the game and given your opponent some possessions that they would not have had you gone on 2 different 4-minute drives, even if they resulted in a punt. So you got to avoid the turnovers. Second one is they need to hit one long pass. Grand Valley can be susceptible to the pass. And, Harding was 2 for 4 last week, I think, for about 36 yards. They're last in the country in passing yards per game. They're highest in the country in yards per attempt. So I think they need to hit one long one, one surprise one, and, kind of cash in when somebody would expect a drive to be a little longer. They hit one over the top and either get in goal to go or score a touchdown. And I think that's what Harding has to do to win the football game. All right. Well, Tony, Super Region 3, it's been fun to cover this year. And I think we have another great ball game to end the Super Region 3 playoffs, or at least the Super Region 3 portion of the broader playoff.
Right.
I also, looking ahead one game, I think that Super Region 3, the winner, no matter which team it is going to be a very tough out for whoever they play. And it would not be, the way the playoffs are shaking out, it looks to me like Colorado Mines, if they win over Central Washington this weekend, like everybody expects them to, will likely host a Super Region 1 team, meaning Super Region 3, Grand Valley or Harding, is going to face likely a Super Region 2 team, Lenore-Rhyne or Valdosta State. Both programs have been in national championship games before. So that's going to be a tough semifinal game,
Sure.
But one that Super Region 3 representative could win. I
would agree with that. And I think I obviously we don't know how the committee is going to shake things out, but I would have a hard time also seeing that the Super Region 3 winner would likely be playing at home.
I agree with that too. Yes.
And so I think that, is at least a somewhat of an advantage for them, as, if regardless of who they're going to face. But yeah, I would agree. I think it bodes well for Super Region 3 to potentially get through to the finals. But yeah, gosh, I mean, if they're going to play a Super Region 2 team, we talked about this on Inside D2 this past Sunday. I mean, I don't know if you could pick two hotter teams than Lenore Ryan and Valdosta State. So a 2 versus 3 for a semifinal would be one whale of a ball game. So just add it to the list of the string that we've had here.
That's exactly what I was thinking. And this will be the last point. I'm gonna look at this through Grand Valley's eyes, because they had to play one more game in the playoffs than Harding. But let's say Grand Valley wins. They will have played Ferris State, Pittsburgh State, Harding, theoretically Valdosta State, and then Colorado School of Mines likely. That's a heck of a run to go to try to win a national championship.
Hey, man, it's a heck of a run just to get out of the stinking region.
It is.
I mean, what was our poll at the end of the season? I believe Ferris was 3.
Grand Valley was 2.
Pitt State was 5, and Harding was 4.
Yeah, something like that. Yes.
Yeah. So a team could be ranked second in the country, and they got to play 3 other top 5 teams to get out of their own region.
Yeah.
Jeez, oh, Pete.
And
that's I mean, even if Harding were to win Saturday, even though they've only played 2 games, they still would have had to have beaten number 2, and I think Central Missouri was number 7. So regardless of who did it, and whoever comes out of this region, there's a walnut and bronze given to the regional champion, and I will say that whoever hoists that for Super Region 3 on Saturday will have damn well earned it.
Very good. Well, Tony, that's my last word on Super Region 3 so far. Anything that you need to add before we head out of here?
I don't think so. I think it's
right.
Like we've been talking about. It's just another game in the line, or the string of great ones. So hoping Saturday's a good, healthy one for both teams, and hope it's another last-second game for everybody to root for.
All right. Well, thank you, Tony. That's Tony Nicolette. I'm Brandon Meisner. We appreciate you very much for joining us and watching the Super Region 3 Regional Final Preview.